Hello, Peak fam. How's everybody doing today? Thank you guys for joining us on a special episode of the Peak Show. We have some awesome guests today. Warren, who's part of our very own Peak team. And then we also have Luke Jones from NORML. So, guys, want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, starting with you, Warren?
Yeah, definitely. Pleasure to be here with Luke today. I'm president and one of the owners of Peake ReLeaf, one of the founding members as well. It's been great to be able to represent my neighborhood that I grew up in Rockville, and we were happy to establish our medical cannabis dispensary there. It's great to be sitting here with Luke. Luke's one of the people that I had the delight to work with over the last couple of years, doing a lot of lobbying at the local, state, and national level. Luckily enough, we are right next to DC, and this is actually a friendship that spans years at this point. It's kind of wild to think about. So happy to be here.
Cool. Thank you, Warren. Luke, tell us about yourself and who you are.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me on as well. And it's true. I first met Warren when I started lobbying with the organization NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And at the time, Warren was the only license holder affiliated business from Maryland who showed up to campaign for law reform. So again, just to, introduce myself, my name is Luke Jones, and I'm a resident of Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm a person who is a citizen activist. I am not a professional lobbyist or, advocate. I guess I'm a professional advocate at this point, though. But really, I was just moved to get involved in politics and try and learn more about Maryland politics as a citizen and somebody who was interested in becoming civically engaged. And awesome. I perceived this policy change, the marijuana law, as really an inevitable thing that should have happened a long time ago. And I really can't believe that we're recording this, and we're still working and struggling, to change the law in Maryland. But I've organized here in Maryland within a organization called the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And I'm currently the director for the state chapter. It's we have no paid staff, and it's all civic volunteer, consumer interests and the families of consumers and those who are interested in protecting the civil rights of their fellow citizens that are abused by these laws. So thanks for letting me give that long-winded introduction. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you, Luke, for providing that background. And you set the stage perfectly for what we're going to be talking about today: legalization in Maryland and cannabis policy in Maryland, specifically related to the two bills that we have in the Maryland General Assembly, one in the House and one in the Senate. We've had a couple hearings. There was a hearing today. There was a hearing. Today's hearing was in the Senate, and the one a couple of weeks ago, I believe, was in the House that Warren, both of you guys testified at. I caught both of your testimony. So we're getting the inside scoop from folks that are participating and really involved at the ground level. So I'm excited about it. I'm sure we're going to get some great info for the Peak audience and folks that are watching. So let's get into it. Whoever wants to kind of just jump in and start off, but we'd love to hear from both of you. Where are we right now as far as, we have the two bills, they've had some hearings for it. Beyond that, like, describe to the audience where the progress that we're at and what's happened so far this year.
Warren, would you like me to go first on that one, or?
Sure, yeah, if you'd like to.
Well, so let's just really quickly lay out that there are, as you mentioned, two bills, one in each chamber. The House bill is House Bill 32. We heard that bill in February, and the bill sponsor, Delegate Jazz Lewis, really did a tremendously good job defending the bill. He really demonstrated command of the facts of the policies. He made it seem like it was time and it was ready. And he presented with a great deal of confidence. And there was a lot of support, even people who spoke in favor with amendments, as Warren and others did. You know, a lot of those amendments were favorably received. The bill sponsor was obviously motivated to make any amendments that are reasonable, you know, that can accommodate as broad an interest as possible while preserving the core features of, you know, directing revenue towards reparative, you know, investments, which almost uniformly people agree with. So really positive progress there. And then, of course, today we are just coming on the heels of a hearing in the Senate with the Senate Finance Committee hearing Senate Bill 708. Now, this is a bill that is brought into the Senate Finance Committee and by its vice chair, Brian Feldman. And he did a very admirable job of introducing and signaling to the committee that he wanted to know, you know, whether or not it was a go, no go kind of situation. And that, I think, is the heart of your question, sort of teeing it up. Where are we in the process? There's a hard deadline of the 22nd of this month, March 22nd, is what we call crossover. That is the date where each chamber basically has to decide, these are the bills we're going to ask the opposite chamber, you know, to signal to the opposite chamber that we're ready to move.
Right.
And I just will tell you right now, before we go into, you know, more depth about it, I've been very close to the development of the bills, but you know, with both sponsors, and very familiar with the provisions of the bills and the status of the negotiation process. And it's not unattainable. It is attainable, technically speaking, but the question is there sufficient will within the assembly and within, you know, key factions of the assembly? And I think what we heard today is that there's more work to do, you know, to convince key members of the General Assembly that it's time to move this bill.
Got you. Warren, what do you think? Just maybe playing back onto what Luke had said about the differences between the two bills, and then generally Maryland, progress in Maryland towards legalization. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely. To be quite honest, I mean, as stated before, it's something that we've been working on and lobbying for and advocating for a very long time. You know, everyone sits and they talk about adult use, and you know, they talk about the tax revenue, and they talk about, you know, the economic benefits. And I was really happy to see both pieces of this legislation really take you know, some of these really important aspects of you know, social equity and the criminalization of marijuana, and trying to make some of these reparative changes to help these, you know, communities that have been disproportionately affected by the prohibition of cannabis. And the one thing that has been you know, really great to see is that I do think that there has been more of a receptive way that these legislators in the General Assembly has been looking upon adult use than we've seen in a long time. You know, I'm having much more meaningful conversations, and I'm hearing about, you know, people, you know, just like Luke right now, you know, the fact that we have NORML so involved, and some of these other advocacy groups so involved with the development of these bills is, you know, it's really wonderful to see. And, you know, the one thing that is really good is, just like Luke said, it's still an uphill climb. You know, there's still some concerns and some opposition. But I think generally we're starting to see a lot, you know, better and more receptive nature to the whole conversation of adult use cannabis. And I think people are really starting to realize that it's, you know, it's wonderful that states try to take this step into decriminalization, but people are still getting arrested and lives are still getting affected by the criminalization of cannabis and marijuana. And I don't think that we can really step into this kind of new light where we see some of those issues being resolved until we just legalize it across the board. The one thing that makes me feel really good about it is that these two bills specifically have a lot of similarities. There's a few differences that I think that they're really trying to work out, and I'm glad to hear those conversations are happening. So I still have some hope that we're going to be able to get this through March 22nd.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Warren, what you were saying made me just think of one of the comments I heard today. You guys may have heard it too, but I can't remember who it was, but one of the senators towards the end was saying basically like, it seems like the train is leaving, and this is like one of the last chances. I mean, we've seen so many other states. Virginia just passed a sort of legalization, even though they kind of kicked the can down the road. New Jersey, even some places you're hearing, they're talking about it in Minnesota now is looking at it. So it seems like so many of these states are really realizing, whether it's from COVID and the hit to the budgets and the revenues, or whether it's just being in 2021 recording this, like you said, Luke, it does seem like that sentiment is really being heard everywhere. And it's good to see that the Maryland lawmakers are getting that message too. So I agree with both of you guys. I mean, it seems like this is really the time that things could happen.
Well, Raj, I appreciate that, and Warren as well, and I also have not given up all hope that the current General Assembly can be brought out of their slumber, and out of the antiquity, of their approach to the issue. It's really remarkable, how many years in a row that these legalization proposals have been introduced, that people are still asking the same questions people were asking generations and generations ago, as if answers are not readily available, which means people really haven't been trusting information or seeking it out. It hasn't been a priority. So Raj, one of the things I want to make sure we get a chance to focus on, is what does it take to get a set of policies around cannabis or other things that reflect the clear majority views of the population, right? How come these things are continuing? Over 60% of drug-related arrests in this state are marijuana related. Now, 60% of all drug-related arrests are marijuana related, okay? And other criminal charges, many of them initiate with a marijuana point of entry for the encounter. And there are a lot of encounters that don't lead to an arrest. So Warren put his thumb really on and finger right on the main issue, which is stopping the criminality. Now, there are legitimate debates about how many licenses, what's the tax rate? Do you graduate the tax rate? What responsiveness can a regulator have versus what do you need to put in the bill? There are legitimate questions, but in the meantime, we still have a hurdle just convincing people that a police response is not a good response, right? From us, it looks like on a list of public policy options, police is like the worst of all the choices. There's 1,000 things you would want to do first, right? Including regulate it, tax it. There's 1,000 things you would want to do before sending a police officer after somebody. But that's what we have. And people don't want to let go of it, Raj. And it's going to be tough, even after the law passes, changing actual behavior on the ground. And when the conversation, if we shift towards, what is coming, we have these current bills. No matter what happens, the bill will either pass this session or it will pass next session. It's not okay. So we knew that it was probably not going to pass before the session started, just because the exigencies of pandemic and priorities and emergencies. So we knew it was a thread the needle bill, even if there was a majority support. We didn't know if we had 3/5, right? And so
Right.
there was always a question, and it was always most likely not necessarily going to happen, right? So the odds were 50-50 at best going in. Now, here's where we are coming out of it, Raj, which is that we are about to wrap up this session, and if they don't finish the work on this bill, it's going to be Bill 1 at the beginning of next session. They're so close, and everybody knows it has to happen just from a finance, revenue, police reform. And but the problem is that we're going to crash into an election cycle, and people are going to be campaigning. It's going to be chaotic. So we're going to get it done. But the next step is going to be about talking about what happens after, right? Because the bill passage is the beginning.
Right.
Are the social equity investments having their desired impact? Are people preparing for business opportunities, not just in handling the flower, but in the changes that need to happen at the local jurisdiction level in order to support business opportunities? Remember, just because the Annapolis legislature makes something a possibility, you still have to have a local zoning and licensing and business permitting standards that have to follow. So there's going to be a lot to talk about as this adult use system comes into play. We do need to keep track of public health impacts associated with a range of quality of life issues, including cannabis consumption and other things. So we're going to want to know what the impact on traffic safety and youth access turns out to be, and whether our expectations and trends that we see elsewhere, will continue to play out here. And we also are going to want to see what happens when a legal substance, people tend to use it more. It's going to become more frequently detectable within the general population, but it may have other cascading effects, like a reduction in the abuse of alcohol consumption and the abuse of other substances. So we may see an uptick in cannabis, okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's necessarily a bad thing. That may be a very good thing if we look at other associated trends associated with broader public health concerns. So when we move into a legal world, we're going to need to look at what happened to the illicit market and what happened to the people who were involved. Are we supporting their entrance into a legal economy? I don't just mean a legal cannabis economy. Warren mentioned this earlier, but it's also about other, other investments that can support people's aspiration to, if you want to become a baker and have an infused product in your bakery, that doesn't mean necessarily your whole life is about a cannabis business license, but it allows you to expand your service delivery to customers. And why wouldn't we want to have a licensed environment that would support legal business activity for small businesses and to encourage partnerships between small business players and actors in the economy and to facilitate that. So anyway, Raj, I think that those are some of the things we're going to shift our conversation to. We made a promise for expungement in these bills. We need to make sure that those expungements happen and that people understand that they should not be discriminated against. We need to make sure that employers are, free to make sure people are not impaired, but we don't want employees, to face discrimination in the workplace. We don't want parents to face discrimination in their access to visitation rights or any other rights of parentage. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of removing the stigma and removing the burden that has been uniquely placed on marijuana consumers. I'll say it like that.
Sure, definitely. And before Warren, before we get over to your thoughts specifically, Luke, one of the early things that you mentioned reminded me of some info that I believe you guys shared, Maryland NORML, at the recent policy conference. And I screenshotted this, so we'll see if we can add it up on the video in post. But a lot of people ask, why did Maryland has decrim, right? Cannabis is decrim. We have a wonderful medical program with great dispensaries like Peake ReLeaf. But some people are saying, well, isn't that enough? Like, what's the issue? But I really like this graphic that you guys had shared, and I'll just read from it. So in 2015, which was I think that was pre-decrim, or right when decrim went into effect, there was 2,427 marijuana arrests, and they represented 31, or for sales and manufacturing, they represented 31%. And there was 14,329 arrests for marijuana possession, representative of 59% of overall drug crimes. Then switching to 2019, there was 1,946 arrests for marijuana sales and manufacture, representing 36%. And 15,024 arrests for marijuana possession, representing 61%. So that was a really powerful, just those stats really speak a lot to the answer to a common question that I hear from folks that maybe aren't as well versed in the policy. Like, why do we need these changes? Why does this have to happen? Because we can see that, and this trend was echoed in places like New Jersey and even California going back decades ago. With decrim, it either keeps things the same, or even we see sometimes, like the case in Maryland, interactions with police, arrests tend to sometimes even go up. So, that just made me think about what you guys had shared at that last conference, and a great example of why we need to continue to pursue this kind of stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, I have that graphic on the other screen, but I couldn't share my page. But
no, you're good. Yeah, we'll get it added. Go ahead, Warren. I want to hear from you, and specifically, can you talk about some of the stuff that may be getting in the way? Like, Luke talks about some of the specifics. I know we had a couple particular topics noted down, like consumables and edibles has been a big concern, minor and underage use. So maybe if you want to talk a little bit, Warren, about, in your opinion, like what have been some of the specifics that are causing the roadblocks, and possibly addressing, like, how do we get past those?
Yeah, definitely. Luke definitely touched on a lot of it. And I think if we were to take a broad brush and kind of highlight the biggest problem, I think a lot of it's just education. That's one of the reasons why Peake ReLeaf is, taking such a strong focus on trying to educate our patient base, try to educate our community, reach out to community leaders, and, be a resource when, people may have questions. I wish we were a resource that was utilized more often. So I think that, all of these issues that we're talking about, we have to look at the issues. We have to educate ourselves, educate the community. I think when, we get, our public as a whole to, really get more involved. I mean, I can't stress enough, like Luke's involvement, and, getting involved in advocacy as a resident. It's, it's something that people take for granted, and I think it's one of those things where you come to a point. I personally came to a point, luckily enough, living outside of DC, there's protests, and there's all these types of events that will be going on in DC. And so I was exposed to, protests and going down to the mall, and, all these things at a very young age. And I think that's where, it became important to me that this is how change happens. If you're not going to get out there, and you're not going to speak to your legislator, and you're not going to speak to the community leaders, then, you're not going to end up seeing the change that you want to. And, the sad truth is that there are other people with opposing thoughts that are going out, and they are speaking to the legislators, and they are making themselves heard. So, it is an interesting issue to tackle with a lot of complications. And I think it all starts with education. We need to, you mentioned a couple things together. consumables, edibles, if you will, and went immediately to minors and underage use. And I think it's one of those things that we need to be more proactive, speaking to the public. I'm a father. I have 3 kids. I also own a dispensary and run a dispensary. I made the choice to speak to my children, and specifically, I have a 16-year-old, and this is a concept that is much more easily understood at that point. And it's important to be discussing with them the importance of cannabis, what it means, trying to really highlight what might be considered the taboo subjects, and try to take them out from that shadow, and really discuss them, and really highlight the science behind it. And it's really interesting to have been on this journey. I mean, we applied back in 2015, and it's been quite a while. My daughter was 10 at the time, and there was an interesting conversation. I made the choice to talk to her about what I was pursuing, when she was 10. Why is dad going to all these meetings? I could have very easily tried to hide that from her. And it was an interesting conversation, because while I'm trying to tell her that there's a medicinal benefit to this plant, that it can be used for the betterment of people in general and the public, at the same time, she's learning that marijuana is bad at her school, and she's having children, bring to her some discussions about it being, this negative substance, and
Right.
It being bad for society. And so it was really an interesting time to speak to, specifically in my experience, a 10-year-old, about something that she's hearing from her respected teachers and people who she holds in high regard, and then trying to tell her that even though there might be some truth in what they're saying, it's not the whole truth. And I think what we really need to do is get out, educate the community, come up with really good regulations to make sure that edibles and consumables and any cannabis product is labeled properly, to make sure that it is directly and very visible that this is a cannabis product. We don't
Right.
want these products to be in the hands of children. That's why we take the regulatory steps that we do to try to ensure that happens. But it's education. We need parents to be responsible. We need parents to hold their medical products in a safe space. We need them to hold their, eventual adult use products in a safe space. In, the same way we wouldn't want them having our pharmaceutical drugs or our alcohol that we might have in a liquor cabinet. We don't want them to have our cannabis products either. And, as long as we educate the community, our community leaders, and even everyone down to the children properly, I think that's where we're going to really see some positive change happen.
Yeah, and if I could jump in on that,
Please.
because it's amazing that there's a sense that we need the police officers involved unless we can demonstrate that there's no risks, right? And you think, my goodness, Warren just enumerated it, but it has to be said again. He talked about pharmaceuticals or a liquor cabinet, but you could go all day about the harms that our children are surrounded by in our homes and the risks. There are flammable substances, there are sharp objects, there's electricity. Some people have explosive things or chemicals, or right? All kinds of things that'll make you go blind, make you lose your organs. I mean, they're right here. We have chemicals that would kill a child that you can buy right at Home Depot. Now, the thing that gets me is that there's some magic belief that for this one substance, we need to write a unique regulatory framework, right? They say like, well, what about traffic safety? Now, I point out to people that we have traffic safety officers whose job it is right now already to protect us from impaired drivers. Nobody wants impaired drivers on the road, right? Right. That you don't write a law for every substance that might cause impairment. You don't do that. You don't write one law for this type of impairment substance and one law for that. And here's a law for people who have too much sleep. And here's a law for somebody who, you know what I mean? You have to ask a question, why is it illegal? And they say, well, look, if a child inhales smoke, it could cause damage to their lungs, right? As if this is a relevant fact to the fundamental underlying question about the legality of it. You watch the committee hearing today. These are the issues people are still stuck on. The logic of, hey, if we say it's legal, it's as though we're telling everyone we condone it, right? We can't condone this. Right. You can't possibly ask me to condone it. And, you know, Warren just gave an eloquent educational plea, like we need to educate people, and which is true. But at the end of the day, I'm not asking for them to agree that it's good or safe. What I'm not asking anything from them. I'm asking them to stop hurting me. I'm asking them to stop hurting me. Why? Because I'm not hurting them. I'm not. But yet these laws are odious. I'm not asking them to condone my behavior, but I don't want the police coming in my home saying, do you use lit candles? Your Honor, certain number of people die every year from lit candles. Your Honor, we need to give the police the authority to crash into somebody's home and Breonna Taylor them in some investigation for lit candles. Why? I could bring up experts all day long that'll tell you how damaging to society lit candles are. And some legislator in Annapolis is going to go, see, we can't disarm the police from this. It'll unleash a flurry of people burning unsafely in their homes, right? And you sit there and you think, you got to be kidding me. I feel like I'm in a comedy sketch, but look at the testimony from these legislators and supplant the word cannabis for something else like a candle and play it back. Maybe we should do that edit, Raj, and insert a little clip.
That's our next Peake marketing project.
There you go. I mean, you raised a really great point. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a fundamental issue, you know. I mean, and that's why we bring up the criminal element and the fact and how big of an effect it has had on, you know, such a wide, you know, it's a broad brush of people. It's not a, you know, obviously there's been a disproportionate communities that have, you know, taken most of that, you know, taken most of the hit on that, and it's, you know, it's so incredibly unfortunate that we got to make sure that we take care of this as soon as possible, because at the end of the day, you know, we need people to be responsible. At the end of the day, people need to be responsible for themselves. You know, one of the senators, you know, today had mentioned, you know, in a libertarian sense that he, you know, really believed in it, and then of course kind of backtracked and out some concerns that he might have had. But I mean, that's it right there. I mean, you know, we need to make sure that these laws, you know, are going to be, not first and foremost, reflect the will of the people. I mean, that's why we have elected officials. You know, they are supposed to be, you know, passing legislation and making laws that we as their constituents believe in. And that's why it is so important that we reach out to our legislators. But you know, Senator Feldman said today that 75% of Marylanders are in support for adult use cannabis. I mean, at what point, when you have such an overwhelming majority, I don't know of many other things that are agreed more upon. Do you not have that? And it's been far over 50% for a good many years. And, you know, at what point do we need to look at this and see that this is an issue that needs to be resolved? It needs to be resolved as quick as possible. To Luke's point, and honestly, even my own point on education, you know, that's something to, you know, what Luke said earlier, we can continue to work on. You know, this is, you know, we passed adult use legislation, it's not like the problem just ceases to exist.
Right.
All of a sudden we have to go back. We have to make sure that things are being done properly. We have to educate the community, the regulators, and anybody who might want to be involved in this, and the people who are going to be consuming it as well. That's why you see in a lot of these states, Colorado did a great job, funding an educational platform, by the state of Colorado to try to educate people. There was a fund, I believe it was directly funded by the revenue that they received from the adult use program. So, these are the steps that we need to be taking. To Luke's point, it can't happen soon enough. It's far overdue. And, hopefully we can get, past some of these roadblocks and get people to agree. And, I hope it's done this year. I try to be a glass half full kind of person. The realist in me is still aware of the fact that there's a good chance it's going to bleed over into next year and next legislative session. But that's not going to stop me from going out there and, speaking to people and trying to get this done and passed as quickly as possible.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Thank you for contributing that. So and I totally agree with both of you guys. I think education is such a huge part of all this. Luke, we laugh about your candle comment, but it's really funny when you hear some of these people act like it's something that hasn't been a part of human society for not centuries but thousands of years. Like it's like this thing just came out of nowhere, and it's like this new drug. It's like, no, it's been around for so long. So I question how much of it is rooted in reality, which I do think, again, we need some education, and some of it just seems like it's just pandering and like you guys were talking about before, just a shirking of personal responsibility and the responsibility to educate yourself and educate your family members. So I think that's a great summary right there.
Yeah, and I think we can educate when we can start talking about the endocannabinoid system and how it's been used for so long. But we're not here to educate on that today. I think right now we're here to discuss specifically this adult use legislation. And I think at the end of the day, we have a lot of the solutions for these problems. I can't say enough. I feel like we're really close.
Right.
This is some really bold bills that they put together. And I'm really hoping that there's these discussions that are happening across the aisle. I heard they are. I hope they're going to be meaningful.
Yeah.
I think that we have already some good regulations for edibles in the medical market. I would argue I don't think they are actually fitting of a medical market. Honestly, I think the edible regulations are more fitting for an adult use market, and they tend to kind of match a lot of the regulations that they have in other states. But once again, we don't have to recreate the wheel. It's literally right there already in the medical market, so we can just utilize those regulations in the adult use, and that should be solving a lot of the concerns about the edible and consumable products. But at the end of the day, I mean, we need people to be responsible. A lot of times people will bring up the one instance on, the one very famous instance in Colorado where a young adult ended up consuming cannabis and ended up jumping from a hotel, and he sadly passed away. The sad part is people always really hammer down on the fact that he had eaten an edible, but they don't list the slew of other types of medications and drugs that were in his system at that point. And at the end of the day, we just need people to act responsibly. It's to Luke's point, I mean, there's so many different things in our households are available over the counter that are going to either intoxicate you or be harmful to you. I don't know why cannabis is always treated so differently. But it's something that I'm hopeful that we're getting past here. And one thing that I've been really happy to see in these pieces of legislation, I'm sure Luke is, but home grow has been on both of these bills. I haven't seen or heard a lot of pushback on that specifically. I think that it's going to be a great way for people to be able to grow their own cannabis. And, if you're, have the ability to grow at your home and be able to, medicate yourself, self-medicate at a cheaper cost. And I think that's going to be a great opportunity for, the people of Maryland. I think it's a plant. It's been here for thousands of years, to your point earlier, Raj. And I think that, we need to be, advocating for our rights as, people and residents of Maryland. So, I mean, there's a couple other little obstacles.
Right.
I'm very curious. We don't have a ton of time until the 22nd, as mentioned earlier. So I'm really hoping to see some good movement on it going forward. It'd be interesting to see how today's hearing ends up affecting people's decisions moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. Luke, go ahead. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to say, first of all, I want to give a big shout out to Peake ReLeaf of Rockville, because
Thank you.
There are a couple of original licensed teams, family owned, operated size businesses that have really been willing to speak up and get involved, and you guys have been not just directly involved but supportive, of the community, and I want to thank you as a responsible business within the state and within the sector. I heard what you said, Warren, publicly in other forums, but when you go and you give testimony and you say, hey, we don't want a business sector that's just dominated, by consolidated ownership, so that we can have broad participation. You're already a license holder, but you're speaking for people who haven't gotten there yet. You know what I mean? So I wanted to lift you up for that as individuals, but as a team, and as a business, it's responsible. And I also think that your proximity to our county, government, Rockville, of course, it being the center for the government of Montgomery County, you've done a lot to help make sure that the political people within Rockville and within your community there have access to real information about this industry, and help demystify, and normalize, the fact that a couple of blocks, basically, a couple of blocks from our county seat of government, there's a dispensary, providing medical cannabis to patients, and the world didn't fall apart. There's not a concentration of broken, business windows or car thefts or any of these kind of negative consequences. You've got a beautiful, beautiful business there, and you're a responsible member of the community up and down the block. So thank you for that. We have, as Warren said, just like 2 weeks basically left. I'm going to call it something like that, because we're already into the session at a certain point. But on our little Linktree page, Linktree, / Maryland NORML. The reason I say that is we have these little one-click action alerts. People can just send an email using that tool, because a lot of times, who represents me in Annapolis? Isn't there an easy way to do it? The answer is yes, there is. And there's only 47 senators. There's only 47 senators in 47 Senate districts in Maryland. We're talking about Annapolis, of course. We're not talking about the federal senators. Right. We're talking about in Annapolis. There's 47 of them, and so we have an email tool, and it's one click. Email them. You can do that. Please take those little actions. I don't know if broadcast time in time, people hear this message, but I thought that I would let people know, that there is something people can do right now. Right now, you can click on that thing and get the message, and it doesn't just broadcast, it goes to your representative. And we have a representative form of government. right? And so if you want policy change, that's a tool, right? Because it goes, if they need to represent your views. And guess what, folks? After the session, we get to have a conversation about which politicians were blocking it, because we're about to go into an election cycle. And we want to make sure that voters are informed, right, about what their choices are, to make sure that they have a representative form of government. That's the full circle message from me as to why I do this, which is civic action, to produce policy outcomes. Otherwise, it's only paid lobbyists that will influence the conversation. And if only paid lobbyists are there, then only certain interests are being cultivated in the policymaking process. We need citizens, people to directly impact, and we want to make it easy, Raj. So thanks for letting me say those words.
Yeah, sure, definitely. And that too reminds me of what you were saying, reminded me of what you were talking about earlier, Warren, and saying, like, if you don't talk to your representatives and express those thoughts, other people will. And Luke, you just capped on the second part of that, is not only will they express thoughts, but they'll express money too. They'll have the dollars behind it. And so I think, in the last few years, we're starting to see that pick up. But again, a lot of that is just because some of these massive MSOs and corporations are realizing how much revenue is in it. But, I think before then, there historically wasn't a lot of that lobby money in the pro cannabis side, so that totally makes sense. And I totally agree with what you're saying, Luke, is that, we can kind of combat that by banding together on a grassroots level. And likewise, I commend you guys at NORML and Maryland NORML. What you guys have been doing with the chapter to educate people and get folks out has been great. And we'll definitely go through all that and get your contact info. But, as we get ready to wind down, I just want to get, one prediction from each of you guys as far as what may happen next. It doesn't have to be like, you can predict if the bill will pass successfully if you want, if you've got your crystal ball around, I don't know. But, just want to hear, what do you guys see coming up in the future? And then, we'll kind of sign off, and Luke will plug some of the contacts for NORML Maryland and how folks can get involved. So, Warren, you want to start off first, and then we can.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'll take a stab at it. That is definitely a loaded question. To tell the truth, I'm really not sure what we're going to see in the next couple of years definitively. I think that we're seeing a lot of the obstacles being taken down. I think that we're seeing finally some movement from the federal government on understanding, hey, I think we're up to 35 different states and different that have some sort of legal cannabis market. That's well over the majority of the states within our country. And I think that they're finally starting to get the message that, hey, we got to do something. I mean, I think they even mentioned it in the hearing today. The MORE Act passed House last year. More symbolic than anything, because we knew that Mitch McConnell wasn't going to bring it to the Senate. But we have the SAFE Act. We have a lot of these different bills that, and honestly, the SAFE Act is being incorporated in, from what I understand, to most cannabis legislation on the federal level. So, and once we start moving in that direction and we start normalizing, cannabis, and possibly even start looking at it as a commodity, it'll be interesting as states start to figure out what they want to do as these federal, roadblocks start to come down. There's obviously we could go down the rabbit hole of whether or not there's going to be interstate commerce, or the roles of these multi-state operators or MSOs. And you brought up lobbying. I saw a really interesting article earlier this year, I believe, that highlighted the lobbying, how funding has been going in national lobbying, and we are now starting to see some of these companies really funding some of or stepping up with their lobbying efforts and really trying to put their money into these efforts. And, a lot of the money used to come from, organizations like Marijuana Policy Project and, a lot of these advocacy groups that would raise money for their lobbying efforts. And, it's really interesting to see kind of how that is changing and see these multi-state operators really step in and, what the impact that'll be. I think the most important thing that we can do is, and what I hope to see kind of change in the future, is items like automatic expungement for people who have previous convictions. The fact I always hear people talk about a fiscal note and the obstacles and, how it's going to cost money or it's hard. And, I was really happy you highlighted Delegate Lewis's testimony during that HB 32 hearing. And I thought it was great. I mean, I think highlighting the fact that we can say it's hard and it's going to cost a lot of money doesn't even begin to really showcase the difficulties for these people that might be dealing with these convictions and possibly lost the opportunity to go to college or university, or lost a great job, or lost their children, or it's just it's amazing to think that we can see something and be talking about its legality and then not be trying to repair some of these actions. And I am happy to say Peake ReLeaf, we're working on doing a couple of different expungement clinics that hopefully we're trying to pull in some local law firms to be able to offer their services, to be able to expunge some of these these crimes and these convictions off these people's records, to hopefully move it so they can put it behind them. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I think we need to get to this point where we take that first giant leap into the right direction, and then really look back and start trying to repair some of these damages that have come because of the prohibition of cannabis. So probably not the direct answer you're looking for. I think I've raised more questions than gave any sort of guidance, but I mean, like I said,
that's
really
the industry.
Issue, so.
Yeah, exactly. That it's very. It reminds me of, I don't know how closely you guys followed it, but a lot of the Virginia state senators were really complaining, like, this thing is long and we don't have enough time, and it's like all these thousands of pages. I've never seen anything this long, blah blah blah. But it's true. I mean, it's totally true. It's a complicated issue. There's it's not black and white. There's a lot of different sides to it. So that's okay. We'll accept that answer, Warren. No problem.
Luke, like I said, I'll work on that for our next one of these. I'll come up with something a little bit better.
No worries.
Well, here's my prediction. I was on an interview a couple of weeks ago, and it was hot on the heels of the hearing for House Bill 32, and I was feeling very, very optimistic, and I gave a prediction at that time that I thought we would pass this session. Now I'm gonna I'm going to resist the urge to say it's not going to happen this. But here's what I will say. Here's my prediction. And I think this is a fair thing to say, is that the framework of House Bill 32, I believe, will become law in Maryland. And I believe that the differences between Feldman's bill in terms of the considerations, that he was bringing to the conversation. And I would like to clarify, I reached out to Senator Feldman before session started and helped schedule the first meeting between Feldman and Jazz Lewis, which happened before session started. And having close to this conversation throughout the process, and they have been communicating and they have been touching base from time to time, and they have proxies, trying to work on specific resolutions of core issues, okay, like one regulatory authority, right? There's a lot of agreement where will it go? What's going to happen to the infrastructure and good work that the public administrators within the commission have done. And so all of those kinds of things, I wanted to share that I believe that the remaining issues were largely red herrings designed to make sure that we move the bill into next session, because some of them were dead on arrival proposals, like caps on small businesses. And the current license holders have until 2024 for their renewal phase, which was part of their original contracts and their original license expectations, that they would have, unfettered market competition within the space through, the initial license period. Okay. When the license renewal, there's an understanding that conditions may be different. So I think that the 2024 calendar year is significant in the minds of the current license holders. If the bill had passed this session, the first round of new licenses, being social equity licenses, would have been in 2023. So delaying the bill until next year does not necessarily have to even change the overall calendar. I mean, we could design it so passage next year still gets us to social equity applicants beginning to receive authorization to, enter business deployment in 2023. We could foreseeably see that. So at the end of the day, my prediction is that the current framework of the bill, as Jazz Lewis introduced, now I think that that's going to be the framework for legalization and adult use in the state. And I think that it will not solve equity problems. I think that it will do a lot to help. I think that cannabis business licenses, even if every single last one of them went to a person of color, would not produce the stated vision of healing these damages and producing equitable, economic opportunity and participation for a community that has suffered intergenerational harm. So we need to think much broader than just cannabis and aspire to help people achieve their dreams, not marijuana businesses exclusively. It shouldn't be different than anything else. If somebody who has been damaged by a bad public policy, we want to support them to enter into a healthy, economic, independent life. And that might mean that they're an architect, or that might mean that they're an environmental planner or a civic engineer or some other beneficial contributing member of our society, not just a cannabis business, right? And that's one of the reasons why I personally really do like the investments in the HBCUs, because I understand the mission and why they're part of the Maryland educational program. It's not just some gift to African Americans. It's part of the built infrastructure to meet the needs of the population in the state. And we have target populations. So I like the idea of investing in HBCUs. Why? Because there's a range of academic, vocational, and professional training available to a targeted population. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And they might become bakers with a or without a cannabis product on their shelf. That shouldn't be any concern to ours. What business choices they're trying to make. We don't want to micromanage people and say, use Velveeta cheese in your business and do this kind of business or do that kind of business or do this cannabis business. We want to support people going after their dreams. And the cannabis business sector doesn't have to be special. It is not complicated. We make it complicated because we've got to extract ourselves from all of this nonsense we've been investing in to sustain it. How, right? And so, but really at the end of the day, look at how many business transactions happen in our society every day. Cannabis business transaction is going to enter into the market.
Yeah.
And it's going to be regulated. And we do a lot of things in our market. It's not abnormal. It's not that abnormal, right? It's something that we can handle. It's not beyond our capacity to move forward as Warren was giving us that vision for. I want to make it seem attainable and achievable by pointing out that we already do it. We're already doing it for other things. It's not like we have to do something special we've never done before. We have demonstrated capacity, and we're a mature society. And guess what? A mature society doesn't try and incentivize healthy behavior by sending police officers after people who are, come on, right? We know we're right. So we don't. So anyway, guys, that's my prediction. My prediction is that we right now are working on the final bill. And if it doesn't pass this year, it's going to go at the beginning of next year, and there's going to be great fanfare. But
cool.
I think we're close. I really don't see a huge amount of change coming into the bill. There may be tweaks, but at the end of the day, we have a vision for the future, and it looks like we will be investing in our people. We're going to set up some revenue streams that will look at areas of cancer, of damage, and we're going to go after our body, our civic body, and we're going to try and make it healthier. And we're going to put, right? It's like a vaccine metaphor, right? We're going to inject a healthy public policy response to try and fix and give people a chance to get out from underneath this oppressive law. And I view it as an oppressive law. I view it as a tool of oppression.
Yeah.
Well, I would tend to agree. I do feel like I think we reiterated that a lot tonight. That, I do think that this is, got the good framework. And I do believe that I think a lot of the heavy lifting has been done. I think that, we really are nearing the finish line. Whether it's just a matter of, I think we've been saying it's not a matter of if, it's when. And, I think it's just, we're all hoping that it's as soon as possible. And, I really do, like I said, it's been years. It's kind of crazy to think that, Luke, at this point, but, I really do appreciate you doing the work that you've been doing and staying at it, and just volunteering your time, you've been great to Peake ReLeaf, and we've been wanting to support you throughout as well. Obviously we've been a member of NORML, I think, since pretty much we've opened up. So, at the end of the day, it's, we're always grateful to have you, and, we want to support what NORML's doing.
Got my card right here.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have it on me, but like I said, we are very, very grateful for all the work that you and your organization does as well. So I did feel pretty great to have Keith over at the dispensary that one time. I thought that was kind of a moment where, having the founder of NORML at my medical cannabis dispensary, it was just a neat moment. If you would have told me when I was in high school, right down the road from my dispensary, that, I would have the founder of NORML at a medical cannabis dispensary, much less one that I was operating, I think I would have told you that you were crazy. So it's amazing what has been happening. I'm just, like I said, I want to cross that finish line. So.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, and I wanted to thank both of you guys for your involvement as a Maryland resident citizen. Thank you both for the efforts that you've been putting forth and will continue to put forth. And on that note, just before we wrap up, and also thank you guys for the time tonight. This has been a awesome conversation with a lot of different aspects and different facets as we intended it to be. So I appreciate you guys hanging out. And before we kind of jump off here and end things, Luke, tell us more about NORML Maryland, and what can people do if they want to learn more, if they want to help you out, if they want to help the legalization cause out. Give our audience maybe a call to action of how they can get involved.
Great. Well, the most immediate thing for folks to do is to know the answer to two questions. The first question is, who represents you in Annapolis? Everybody should know the answer to that question. And believe me, most people that you meet don't. A lot of people think, well, Baltimore is the capital of Maryland, and they think about it. No, isn't there some place out there in Chesapeake Bay that's the capital? And I'm serious. A lot of people are at that starting point. I certainly was, So there's no shame in that. Who represents you in Annapolis? You got to know that. The second question is, what are their views on the issues that are important to you, right? So if the question is legalization or decriminalization, protecting the interests and the goals and the livelihoods of the marijuana consumer and our families, and if this is an policy issue, you need to know what your representatives' views are on the subject. So those are the two questions, right? Who represents you in Annapolis, and what are their views? That is key, because once people know those two fundamental things, then you know what kind of action you need to take. And generally, you're going to have one of three kind of situations. You're going to have somebody who is 100% staunchly ready to sponsor the bill, ready to help out, ready to say, sure, I should, Then you're going to have people that are maybe a convincible, they'll vote if it comes in front of them, but they're not going to lift a finger to help because it's not a priority. And then you've got the people who are opposed to it, and it's going to be one of these situations. And then you're going to have a much better sense of how you can be effective. One thing I try to get people to do is focus on their own representatives, and not say, well, what about Luke Clippinger, the chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee in the House? And I'm like, are you in his district? No. It's like, well, why don't you not worry about Luke so much? Why don't you start with the place you have the most impact? And then if you've got somebody who's all ready to go, then ask them to contact their colleagues. Now, let me just say, how can people get in touch with us? We would like to suggest, that people use our national NORML website for educational information purposes. This is where you will pop a bowl of popcorn and get into traffic safety data. You could get into teen use acts. There's all kinds of information in the in the national NORML page. Our state chapter is here, and our focus right now is finishing the General Assembly with as many emails to elected officials as we can. I mentioned our Linktree page. I encourage people to, because right there at the top, you can one click send an email. That's really to finish off our work. Once we shift towards the end of the session, we're going to approach 420. And that's when everybody wants to interview and talk about marijuana, because it's going to be April and it's 420. And that's when you're going to see the newspaper articles come out. And our chapter will have activities around then. What are we going to be doing? We're going to be doing much earlier what we did in the past couple of years, which is encourage people to register for our policy conference. We have a now annual policy conference, which is turning out to be a great forum for an annual check-in on the status of cannabis policy in Maryland, where we really give our legislators a chance to present to the public the legislative changes that are happening in Annapolis. So what I'm encouraging everybody to pay attention to is Maryland NORML is getting ready already for next legislative session. And we're going to do that by moving into the spring, inviting everyone in the state of Maryland to register early for our fall campaigns. And we're going to make sure people know what legislation to anticipate coming into next year. And that's the work that we're going to be doing, Raj. Thanks for an opportunity to let people know. We're on Facebook, we're on social media, and those are main ways that people can track the work that we're doing.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, again, thank you guys so much for making the time tonight. We appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we can continue to do these and check in with you, Luke, and check in with NORML again down the road. It's an exciting year for sure. There's a lot of stuff happening. So we'll be keeping our eyes tuned and our eyes peeled and our ears tuned to the recent developments and checking out your channel and all the stuff going on with NORML. Thank you guys again. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Peake fam, for checking it out. We will catch you guys next time. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No problem.